Hey, what's up, Next Level crew? Welcome back to yet another episode of What's Your Next. And today we have a really super exciting topic, at least it's exciting for me because I'm a numbers guy. And that is the ROI blueprint, navigating financials to spot a winning franchise. That's cool, right? Spot a winning franchise. That's what we're here for.
Welcome to What's Your Next. This is the go-to podcast for aspiring business owners who want to get to the next level, escape the rat race, and give their middle finger to the corporate 9-to-5. If you want financial freedom, work-life balance, and the business of your dreams, you're in the right place. Dave and Stacy Riska, husband-wife franchising duo, openly share their successes, failures, and lessons learned in franchising, business ownership, and working with your spouse.
And today we're going to be covering a little bit more in depth ROI, return on investment, and what are the concepts, what are the different concepts out there in the franchise world. And when you're evaluating franchises, particularly around ROI, not all franchises are created equal, nor should ROI really be the only criteria you have in evaluating a franchise. So Stacey, how can someone apply the concept of ROI to evaluating the many different types of franchises that are out there today?
Right. The many different. There's 4,000 of them, right? And usually when candidates work with us, we are helping them winnow that down. So they're only really focusing on 2 or 3 that are a really good match for them. But even looking at 2 or 3, how do you evaluate which is going to be the best one, especially if you're looking at ROI? Because the numbers are going to be different across every different franchise. So many variables go into it. Is it a home-based model? Is it brick and mortar? The revenue, how long may it take you to ramp up that revenue stream? Is the franchise helping you with the marketing? Do they have back office call center work? Or are you going to have to come out the gate really strong in marketing? Like all of these factors tie in to ROI and evaluating different franchises. And so that's why we give our candidates the tools and templates to use in evaluating that. And I know Dave is a numbers guy, and we're talking a lot about numbers today, but there's also the non-numbers part of it. And Dave alludes to it when he talks about the why. When you're evaluating a franchise, it has to check the box for your why. And also ensuring that it's a good brand with strong service and support, because there can be actually a monetary value to that of coming into a brand that's already recognized in the community.
All right, so can you explain to our listeners a little bit about the different types of franchises? So for instance, passive versus more involved, franchises where they're more involved. Can you lay that out? Because I think that has a big impact on how large the ROI that you're looking for from each one of those when you're comparing them.
Yeah, good point, right? So let's say you're looking at 3 different franchises. Not only could they be different models in the sense of home-based versus brick and mortar, but they also could have different business models in the sense of, are you going to be owner-operator, meaning you're going to work in the business? Is it more semi-passive, where the sense that you're going to work on the business, but you're going to hire somebody to be a manager and run the day-to-day? Well, that's going to incur additional operating expenses. Or is your business model more passive? Let's say like vending, where you set some machines and then you just got to go out and refill them. 3 very different business models, 3 very different ways of making money, and 3 very different ways of looking at the operating expenses.
Absolutely. And this comes way back to, again, what your why. What is your why for wanting to be in business or acquire a business, whether it's a franchise or not? Because if you are going to outsource your call center support, which is a really good idea, or you're not really good at marketing and you're going to outsource the marketing for your operations, you're going to pay an additional cost to do that. Hopefully, that'll be captured on the other side in the revenue that you receive, but it does have an impact on ROI. So it's important that, and what that ties to is in your why, if your why is flexibility and freedom, and you have to do all the work to get a 30% ROI, you have to evaluate, is that worth it for you? Right? Is that what you're really looking for when you're acquiring that franchise or business? So when comparing different franchises, should someone just look at who has the lower initial investment, or should they be looking at the big picture?
Right, because Dave's a numbers guy. Let's just look at the bottom line. What's the initial investment? But don't use that as your only criteria. So my answer is no. Don't just look at initial investment, because that's not the ultimate gauge of you being happy, successful, and profitable in a franchise. Let me give you an example. 2 franchises that have about $100,000 investment. One is a home-based concept, let's say in mobile pet grooming. So $100,000, you got your van. Day one, you're already out the door making money. But another concept, $100,000 investment, is more brick and mortar in the health and wellness space, great service for the community, but it also requires licensing, credentialing, and therefore in that franchise, you can't make a dime of revenue until 6 to 9 months down the road. So if you're only looking at initial investment, they're both $100,000, but it's not really giving you the accurate return on investment, because in one, you're making money from day one. In the other, it's a longer payoff to start seeing revenue come in.
Right. And this goes back to how long it takes to recover your investment that we talked about in our previous episode. So if you're watching this one and you haven't seen that one, you should definitely go back and watch that one first. We explain that. And it's the return on investment over the lifetime that you're going to run that franchise that really matters. It's not necessarily the 1 year or the 2 year. You have to look at this as a much longer term investment to really compare ROI on one franchise for another. Because not necessarily is a brick and mortar, just because it is a larger investment up front, worse than a home-based business if you look at it over a longer period of time. And if you look at it from an exit strategy point of view, there can be some benefits of brick and mortar versus something that's run out of your home. All right, so let's talk about, we talked about expenses here. We talked about the investment expense that is involved in acquiring a franchise. Let's talk about the revenue side. So we spent some time in our last episode kind of breaking out how you can evaluate revenue. And our next episode, which you should definitely check out, is we're going to walk through our return on investment calculator and actually show you how to calculate ROI based on revenue and expenses. All right, so we just covered initial investment, or returning on your initial investment. Can you elaborate a little bit more on, in ROI, both the ongoing expenses and the ongoing revenue that is involved in the ROI calculation?
All of these questions about ongoing expenses, they are answered in item 7 of the FDD. They all factor into the initial investment. And so there's just so many factors that go into determining this, because a lot of it's going to be location, right? And so let's say you're doing a brick and mortar and you're in Washington, D.C. Well, your real estate and your build out costs are going to be very different from somebody who might be in Boise, Idaho. So you really have to understand the dynamics of those numbers, but also then on the revenue side as well, because, and this is a franchise question, if you have the flexibility to modify your pricing, but hopefully you'd have the ability to have higher pricing in DC versus in Boise, Idaho. So location matters, market demand matters, like what may do well in one area may not necessarily do well in another area. And I think brand ties to it as well. There is a benefit of coming out in a franchise with an existing brand that already has name recognition, maybe an established customer or client following, versus a more emerging brand that lets you in early, but you're going to kind of have to put the stepping stones of building that brand, getting customers aware of you, and building your book of business.
All right, so let's come back to the why for a second here. And you've just outlined revenue, you outlined expenses. One of the things that a lot of franchises offer today is turnkey operations, or they offer services around the franchise operations that allow you to not necessarily have to do those yourself. Now, those are obviously going to add to your ongoing cost side of the equation. So can you kind of elaborate on those expenses? And when you're looking at ROI, it's not always just the numbers of one versus the other. There's many other factors involved in it.
Right. It's not just the numbers. And that's why we encourage our candidates to use a spreadsheet. We give you tools and templates to use in evaluating them. Because if you have 3 different franchises that you're looking at, all these factors go into it. Like Dave was saying, is the franchise going to be helping you with the back office, call center, marketing, lead generation? Do they give you tools and technology? Are you paying for those? Because ultimately, you need to market your business, but it's a matter of, well, are you going to be having the franchise do it? And is there a fee for it? Or what is it going to cost you in marketing dollars to get your business up and running? And then also look, as you're evaluating these 3 concepts, the business model, both in 2 ways. Is it home-based? Is it brick and mortar? And also the business model in the sense, are you going to be owner-operator, semi-absentee, or passive? So when you put those into a spreadsheet and really start looking at them based on both models, home-based versus brick and mortar, and the business model, the ROI will become a lot clearer.
Right. It'll have a lot more value to you to evaluate this based on your why, not necessarily just directly based on the outright numbers. You could tell me every day that your franchise is returning ROI 25% and another one's returning 20%. And I'm not going to make any snap judgments on either of those, because if I got to spend 100% of my time to make the 25% and I can spend 20% of my time to make the 20%, maybe 20% is better. It depends. So that's really what Stacy's trying to accentuate here.
Thank you.
So I think we're going to wrap this up with this today. Thank you for joining us again on another episode of What's Your Next. Hopefully you found this valuable, no pun intended again. And we will catch you on, almost forgot. Don't forget to like, subscribe, thumbs up. We really appreciate it. It really does help us when you do that in the algorithms. Thank you for joining us on another episode of What's Your Next. We'll catch you on the next one.